Nice to see you tonight. Thanks for coming out. And I've got to say, I lived in Sydney for a couple of years and coming back to do this at the Sydney Opera House is always such a joy, such a beautiful building. It never, ever gets old. So it's a real privilege to be here tonight. And before we commence with proceedings and our very, very special guest that I know you're really dying to see and will certainly make it look a lot warmer up here than just one person on a chair, I'd like to let you know if you have any questions for Jarvis, all you need to do is send them through. If you've been here today, you'll know what this is. It's slido.com, spelled SLIDO.com, and you can send your questions through. They'll then be sent on to me. I'll check them on my phone, and we'll hopefully be able to ask them of him towards the end of tonight's proceedings. So feel free to do that. Normally they have the address up there, but yeah, it's slido.com. Shall we get into it? Yeah. I think so. Let's do this. Jarvis Cocker, an amazing musician who's given us just so much joy over the years as the front band of the 90s band Pulp, which I know you and I loved, and as well through broadcasting on his BBC 6 radio music program, which was just magnificent. I listened when I lived over there, Sunday service. He has basically given us a lot of joy over our lives, and thankfully now he's gone and written a long-awaited memoir which is called Good Pop, Bad Pop, and I've loved delving into it over the last couple of days. And while it is definitely full of gems and nuggets about the first 25 years of his life, it stops at around about that age, then he also gets to them using a device that I think is just fabulous. It's actually one of the best devices I've seen for a memoir, and I'm a bit jealous, actually. I've just written one myself and I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's so good. He examines the everyday items of his life that he's collected along the way and stashed in a loft for the majority of his life. So he's just got all this stuff, chucked it in bags in a loft, and that's been the inspiration for the book, which I think is just an absolutely brilliant idea. He went through the contents of the loft and decided what to keep or throw, or cob, as he says, and you'll learn about that during tonight's chat. And from it came the book and a discussion about how the everyday stuff can reveal so much about us, and how the everyday can and does in fact inspire creativity, which is what we're here for tonight. Where does creativity come from? And it inspires it in the most remarkable of ways. It's a brilliant idea, and I'd love you to give a huge warm welcome to someone who loves the sound of a crowd, because it is pretty weird being down the line. So give him a really rousing warm welcome, Jarvis Cocker. Hello, Jarvis. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah.
It's early in the morning in the UK, so thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And the crowd are vibrant. They're ready to go. They're excited for this. I've got to say, though, Jarvis, just starting this book and the concept of the book made me a little bit anxious, because I think not just you, but we have all got a cupboard or a box or a bag of that stuff that's hanging around that we're never, ever going to get through. So what made you finally want to go through it?
Oh, well, yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, originally, this idea of looking in the loft was just a small part of the book. I'd already started writing the book. This was about 5 years ago, and I wasn't getting that far. I think I'd entered into writing a book in a slightly overconfident manner, thinking, oh, well, you know, I've been writing songs for so long, so writing a book will just be easy. It will just be like a very, very, very long thing. But obviously, songs and books are completely different. Like a song has a chorus, you know, which you repeat over and over again. If you put that in a book, people would just think that's a typo, or the author it's mine. So I was doing this book, and it was kind of slow work. It was a more kind of general thing about creativity, I suppose. And then a woman who was one of the editors at Jonathan Cake, the publishers, said, forget all the other stuff, make it all about the loft. That's the most interesting thing. And, you know, none of us like to be told what to do. But I thought about it over a weekend and thought, actually, that's true, because it's about real things. And as you say, you know, it is a collection of junk. I'm not under any illusions really as to the fact that, you know, I don't think these objects are precious. done something for me, but really, if you were to walk past them on the street, you just think, oh, that's rubbish, it's garbage. But for one reason or another, I, over the course of my life, have collected this stuff, carried it with me from flat to flat, and then left it all to fester in this loft of a house in East London that I used to live in maybe 25 years ago. Some friends of mine live there now. And from time to time, as you say, I think we all have that, either a loft or a cupboard or even a pocket, that's got loads of rubbish in.
Handbags for me as well. Handbags are always full of crap. Yep.
Yeah. So you kind of think, well, I'll get round to looking at that one day. And that one day never seems to come. For me, it eventually came. I just decided I had to do it, and I dived in, and kind of literally dived in, because I think you've got some slides there, but you'll see if you have a look that the actual loft, it's not like a big room. It's like a storage unit within a loft conversion.
Shall we have a look at that photo of the loft? I think we have it up there. There we go.
So you can see, I think that picture's got me in the. I'm just giving you a sense of scale there. So the process of going through it was quite arduous, because, as you can see from that picture, you can't stand up. So I had to kind of crouch, get in, and then really kind of almost swim around in the cobwebs and the dust, just pick things up and then bring them back into the room and look at them. And as you said in your introduction, then it was a process for me of thinking, do I keep it? Do I cob it? Throw it? But I took a picture of everything, and I can't really say why that was, but there was like a little voice in the back of my head that said, you should do that. Maybe there's a story in here. Amongst all this stuff, maybe there's a story waiting for you.
Well, there definitely was a story. It was a wonderful step-off point to all the stories, and it promised so much more than, I guess, when you see what the objects are. So I think we should delve into the first object. And this was the one that grabbed me the most when I first saw the book, because it reminded me of an advertisement in Australia that was played regularly, and I loved it because it implied a whole lot of, upper class, beautiful sort of, rich people's tendencies that I would never achieve. But what you've kept as part of your stash of stuff from the loft was this little bit of Cussons Imperial leather. Do you remember the ad? The audience might remember Tahiti looks nice, and they're on the phone and they're in a bath on a private jet. And so to me, Cussons Imperial leather was, it really it spoke to me of another world of rich people and fancy people. But you've kept this little bit, and it's not even the real bit of soap, like it's just a little bit of paper. Why did you keep this?
Well, look, I can show you. I've actually got it here with me today.
No way. Oh.
I don't want you to get the idea that I travel with this all the time. But anyway, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the thing about this. It really was marketed as kind of luxury in soap form.
It really says luxury now, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. So the reason why I've got this is, and this gives you an insight into what the loft was like. So it wasn't like lots of treasures hidden away. There was stuff like this. So when I found this on the floor of the loft, I was kind of mystified for a while. I just thought, why is there a piece of soap up here? Surely I have never got washed up in this place. That would be kind of gross. And then I remembered, so really as you can see, it's really just more label than soap. And that's the significant thing, really. So Cussons, I don't know if it was the same in Australia, but in the UK, sometime, I think in the early 90s, they changed this label design. They did a more kind of modern, jazzy label design. And I was really appalled by this. So then I entered into this kind of slightly obsessive practice of going to shops, reach into the back of the shelves and trying to find, the old style label. That worked for a couple of months. Eventually, the new label was everywhere. And this was the last bar of soap I found with the original label. When it got down to this state where it was not functioning as a bar of soap anymore, I could not bring myself to throw it away. And so it went up into the loft. So this is a piece of rubbish, but it does say something about me. Not a particularly flattering thing, but maybe as something that I don't like change. You know, the thing had changed. I didn't like that. I tried to keep things, I tried to find some stability. I tried to hold on to it, you know. So, and as for why that would be, we didn't have this soap in my family house, but my grandparents had it. And I think maybe that had something to do with me having some kind of attachment to it, because I used to go, me and my sister sometimes used to go and stay at my grandparents'. And their flat, it backed onto a railway line. And it had, there was a window with that kind of beaded glass that stops people snooping on you whilst you're in the bathroom. As trains passed by, it made this lovely kind of light effect, like a kind of whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then there was the smell of the imperial leather. That was a really nice smell. And then what I used to do was, I found out that if you turned the hot tap on their sink just a tiny little bit, then you would get this kind of like a kind of a honking sound, but something to do with water pressure. It sounded a bit like a goose being tortured somewhere. And this combination of the lights of the trains going past, the heady scent of the imperial leather, and the of the pipes was kind of, when I was a kid, it seemed very exciting, but this moment of excitement would only last for a short time, because my grandma would run in and say, "You're going to cause a burst pipe, stop that now." So maybe that's why this attachment came from. I don't know.
I love that, Jarvis. Although most people would say that your lifestyle has changed all the time. It's up and down, you're travelling here, there and everywhere. So that's not the kind of change I think you're implying when it comes to being resistant to it, are you?
Well, but I mean, this is a bit of a leap conceptually, but, you know, I'm in the UK at the moment, and there's a feeling of that at the moment. You know, the Queen passed away 2 days ago. She's been the Queen for my whole existence, it's one of those things. I think people don't like change. They want certain things to be permanent. It gives you a feeling. It might be a false sense of security, but it gives you a feeling of security. When these things go away, it feels like you've had a bit of the carpet pulled from underneath you. So, although the soap thing is I will admit it's slightly obsessive behaviour, but I think it's part of the thing that humans, I think we want things to stay the same. Yeah.
I'm going to go to the next slide, and this one will show something for the people who are keen to find out a little bit about the musical nuggets and gems that I spoke of that are also in this brilliant book. And this one comes from, I think you're around about age 15. It was your science book number 4 that you had, and there's lots of images of this in the book, so if you want to look more, it'll be worth having a look at the book. But this contained something that you found, which I think actually shocked you a little bit. It was the Pulp master plan. You were already coming up with an idea for the band before you even had a band or any musical experience. And you've kept this, and keeping it told you a lot more about the moment perhaps than your memory could of this time. Would that be right?
Yeah. This is here. I just so happen to have got this one as well. So here we are.
You've got the actual book. That's gorgeous.
Oh yeah. So this is like kind of the other end of the scale. You know, finding a piece of ratty old soap in the loft is one thing. It's junk, basically. Finding this was kind of one of the first things that I thought, okay, this idea of self-excavation, of looking at every object in turn, might bear fruit, because the important part, as you say, it's an exercise book, but then look at this bit here, you see. So it says pulp, 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 pulp. So this is like, when I saw that, I had the kind of vague glimmer of recognition But I still didn't really know what I was going to find when I looked inside. And when I opened it up, as you say, pretty much on the second page we get this, which astounded me. Yeah. So this was me, as you say, around the age of 15, wanting to be in a band. I'd wanted to be in a band for a very long time, probably since the age of 7 or something. But now I've decided that I'm going to write down what the band is going to wear.
Love it. It's you've done nothing but create a fashion guide at this point, and I love that. But it was what was available to you at that moment. You didn't have musical education. You didn't have anything to, I guess, to kind of practice on. So you were left with this. I think it's genius.
Yeah, well, you can kind of see that on this other page where I've tried to. I've never been able to read music, so this is a really sad attempt to write out an idea for a song with these little sticks saying that's like hit, 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 hit. Yeah, I think it was like, I think nowadays they call this kind of thing, what is it, manifestation or visualization. if
You're
you
manifesting,
can,
you're right.
yeah, so if you can picture something in enough detail, then maybe it will come true. So in my case, I was imagining a group that would go on stage wearing duffel coats,
Very
crew neck
impractical. It would have
jumpers,
been a bit hot up there in a
yeah,
duffel coat, wouldn't it?
exactly, garish t-shirts, plain shirts, rancid ties, drainpipe trousers, pointy boots, white baseball boots, Oxfam jackets, silly socks, shortish hair, and a sequin used for a silly purpose. Whether you would wear them all, at once, I don't know, because as you point out, you would be absolutely, well, you wouldn't be able to move and you'd be too hot.
Yeah. Jarvis, that is absolutely adorable. But what's it saying about that young person at that time that you're coming up with these ideas, and especially about image at a very young age? Is that something that then fed into what became pulp?
I think so. I mean, as you pointed out, at that point when I wrote that, the group didn't exist. I couldn't really play. So what could I do? I could dream. I could visualize. I could make some ideas. And I took it further. If you go a little bit further, like 4 pages on, then we get to the real meat of the matter here, which is, as you can see, the pulp master plan. So, so I've done a logo here. At that time, the group was called Arabicus Pulp because the band was formed during an economics lesson. And I do believe that Arabicus Pulp is some kind of commodity that's traded on the stock market. It's something to do with coffee, I think. But yeah, then we get to the pulp master plan. Can I read you?
Could you read us some? That would be great.
Yeah, so the pulp master plan, category A, music. Being first and foremost a musical unit, it is fitting that Pulp's first conquest should be of the music business. The group shall work its way into the public eye by producing fairly conventional yet slightly offbeat pop songs. After gaining a well-known and commercially successful status, the group can then begin to subvert and restructure both the music business and music itself.
Hey, Jarvis, how did you go with that, do you reckon? You did a pretty good job, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, but it's funny you should ask that because I do think, like I say, I'd forgotten that I'd written all this. But then when I thought back, I thought, well, maybe some of that was in the back of my mind, Pulp was always about trying to get something going. That was the exciting thing of it, of trying to... it wasn't just about, getting famous and having 20 Ferraris. It was about trying to make something occur. That was always. So I think some of that stuck. It's funny. I do think that the ideas that you have when you're really young, they're just in your mind. They kind of become kind of part of the bedrock of your personality without you really being aware of it. You carry them with you for the rest of your life.
And you followed them through to a certain extent, because I think...
Well, I didn't look. I can show you this. This was how it was supposed to work in diagrammatic form. So I don't know if you can see proper here. So we've
Is
got
that a
this
fist?
fist. Yeah, we got this fist, and it says Major Record Company, and it's gripping this poor little figure here, and this is a repressed artist. But the important bit is up here, which this is kind of a meat cleaver hanging by a thread. And the meat cleaver says Pulp Incorporated on the blade. When that thread is broken, that cleaver is going to fall and sever this arm,
Brutal.
thus release the repressed artist from its grip. So that's a beautiful dream. We didn't quite achieve that, but you know, it was a nice ambition to have.
Up until this point, you only knew how to play, or you were trying to learn how to play John Denver's, is it Annie's song at this point?
Glad you brought that up, yes. Well, that was the thing, you know, I did, even though I was quite naive, I did realise that you have got to actually learn how to play songs. So there was a night school at the top of our road, and they had like a beginner's class in folk guitar or something. So I went there a couple of times, and one evening the teacher did tell us the chords to Annie's song, and I kind of studiously wrote them down and tried to play it. But I was kind of lucky. I being of the generation that I am, punk rock happened when I was like 15, 16. So around the same time when I wanted to be in a band. So suddenly I realized I didn't have to try so hard to, you know, master "You fill up my senses like a night in the fire," you know, because punk just said, "Oh, look, here's one chord, here's another chord, here's another chord. That's it. Just go and form a band. Do it. You can do it. You don't have to learn all these technical things." And that was such a great kind of empowering thing to hear, just at the right time that I needed to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a sense, I guess the music that you started to create after that, it was a combination of the sweet pop that you did grow up with before you got older and discovered punk, especially the songs from the AM radio that you grew up listening to. And then it merged with an attitude that was outside, like an outsider's attitude, I guess, you brought to it. So it was a combination of the two, what you created in the end.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that's it. You accumulate these things, you know, like I accumulated these things in a loft, a mixture of things, but it's the same kind of thing. I mean, at some point in the book, I do kind of say, maybe looking at this loft is like looking at the contents of my brain. You know, it's stuff that we absorb, because we all do it, you know, through telly that we watch as a kid and radio. It all goes in, especially when you're a kid, you really absorb it all, and it all gets mixed together, and that does produce some kind of sensibility. So, as you point out, you know, the first music I heard would be the radio playing when my mum was brushing my hair ready to go to school, you know, and it was like, you've got to remain completely immobile, otherwise you'll get the hairbrush on your head for fidgeting whilst you're getting ready to school. So I would listen very intently to the radio to try and take myself somewhere else. Yeah, the pop songs of that time, I realised that some of them I wasn't bothered about, and some really had an effect. And the way I try and describe it in the book is to talk about the tingle. This is a feeling that I think is quite common in human beings, is when you hear a song that you really like, you get this kind of very pleasant, like a tingly feeling in your shoulders or your neck, you know. Do you feel that?
Feel the tingles? Yep, yes.
Good. Yeah, so I noticed that some songs would do that, and I really liked this feeling, and thought, I'd like to be able to do that. And I think that was the beginning of wanting to be in a band, you know, to find out where that tingle came from, and then maybe find a way to actually make it happen yourself, to write songs that would do that to other people.
Yeah. Well, speaking of feelings, we're going to move on to something a little bit more bawdy, perhaps saucy. Shall we show the slide? What's this, Jarvis? The fantastic dirty joke book, if you can't see from the audience. Oh, you've still got it.
Yeah, not that. I couldn't throw that away.
No way.
Well, yeah. So this is moving. This is a little bit before I wrote the Pulp Master Plan. This was we went for swimming lessons when I first went to secondary school, and we had to get on a bus to go into the centre of town and then get the bus home. One fateful day when we got on the bus to come back to school, this was on the back seat of the bus upstairs.
That's a momentous day for any child that grew up without the internet. When you found stuff like that, for me it was in my uncle's shed. We found a stash of things and blew my tiny mind, let me tell you. When you find that, it's like gold, isn't it, when you're a kid?
Well, it is, and there was a big fight for it. That's why the back cover has come off, so it got ripped off. In the cover. But somehow I won the struggle and took it home. And I think, I don't know, God knows how I did that, because there were much harder kids in our class than me. But I naively, because I would be just about going through puberty at this time, I was brought up in a very female-dominated environment. Basically, my father had left when I was 7. My uncle, who was around the same age as him, he died in an accident. There was only really one male presence, which was my grandfather, and he just seemed like an old man. He didn't seem like a sexually potent man. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice there. But,
you never know, but...
So in my kind of naive, childlike mind, I thought, well, maybe I'll get some clues on sex from this book. I was really wrong. I mean, we only really have to look at the cover.
What did it teach you?
Well, yeah, because look, there's this milkman with looking like he's about to have a heart attack, a well-endowed woman, and she's saying, 1 gold top floor, please. I still don't understand that, really. But I thought this must be some kind of, coded message about sex. And the book, I won't, it's pre-Watershed, so I won't show you inside. But the book is littered with jokes like this that, I just didn't get them. So I thought, God, I'm hopeless. I don't understand anything about sex, So it was... there's a sadness to this book, but
you used it to teach your son, or at least to have a conversation with your son about sex, didn't you?
Well, this is the thing,
and I love this.
Well, yeah. So I kept hold of it, which won't surprise you now, since I seem to keep hold of everything. And then when my son was coming up to that same age. I started thinking about that, and I think, modern parents, as you mentioned, we now live in the age of the internet. So when you've got a kid that's coming up to that age and you know that they're going to start to get that curiosity and want to know about sex in some way, the thought that they might look for information about it online is terrifying. I found that, because I just thought, if you type in sex or any kind of, loaded phrase, the chances are you're going to see something probably quite foul or whatever extreme. So I was thinking about this, and then I remembered, I think I kept hold of that fantastic dirty joke book. So I went and found it in the loft, and it was just a way to start a conversation. I'd made this pact with myself that when my son did get to that age, I would try and have a birds and the bees conversation, because my father had been absent at that time and I'd felt really adrift. I was clutching at straws or clutching at fantastic dirty joke books, for some information. So yeah, it was a way to start a conversation. I said, when I was your age, I looked at this and I wanted to find out about sex, and I looked here. You might be thinking of looking online, da, da, da. And we started this kind of conversation, slightly awkward, went on for about 10 minutes. And at the end of it, he just started laughing and said, we've been having sex education classes at school for the last year. So you could have saved your breath. So, but the thing was, I did it, and it made me feel better, at least. Whether it enlightened him in any way, I don't know.
Thank you for sharing that, Jarvis. That's just gorgeous. We'll move on to the next slide. This one is the Rhythm Machine Guitarioke.
Yes, no,
that
I
looks
haven't
like
got
a
that.
straightforward transistor to me, like or a boombox or something, which I think most of us had, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this was the other thing that was missing from my kind of plan to be a rock star was a guitar. When I grew up there was a guitar in the house, but it was like this, my mum had bought it just to hang on the wall because it was this nice looking acoustic guitar, but absolutely impossible to play. The strings were about that far away from the fretboard. And anyway, because of this kind of punk thing, I thought, punks don't use acoustic guitars, it has to be electric, it has to be. So I was very lucky. My mum we went on a holiday to Mallorca, Ibiza, one of the Balearic Islands just off the coast of Spain. To cut a long story short, my mum began a relationship with a scuba diving instructor who just so happened to have been in a band in his youth, and he brought me an electric guitar.
Your mum had a great holiday.
She did have
That was a great holiday for her.
Yeah.
Sorry, you probably don't want to think about that.
So I ended up with a guitar, but obviously an electric guitar is not much use without something to plug it into. And so that boombox, as that you showed, I pestered my grandparents to buy that. So it is like a normal radio cassette player, but then in the top it's got a drum machine, and then also you can plug a guitar in, so you could play along with the drum machine, or if you wanted to, you could also put the radio on and play along to songs on the radio. That's why I dubbed it the Guitarioke machine. So yeah, that was really the big. So then this was the beginning of me trying to write songs. It all kind of happened on there, and also all my musical inspiration happened there as well, because I was also at the same time as I was trying to teach myself to play the guitar, I would be listening to John Peel's radio show on BBC Radio 1 every night and taping things, and then trying to work out how people made that sound, and could I make a sound like that.
You cite John Peel as one of your greatest musical influences, and he had a radio show on BBC One for goodness knows how many years. And you would eventually, and we'll get to when you eventually performed as part of his radio program, because that was an exciting time for you too. The power of radio in your life and the power of John Peel, were you aware at the time of how much of an influence that would have on the rest of your life?
No, I suppose not. I suppose it's like all of these things. It's the moment when you're born. At first, you have you don't know anything, do you? You can't even see anything. Everything's all blurry. But you have this I think you have this assumption that the world has always been the way it is when you enter it. But then as you get older, you realise that you are born at a certain moment. And with the John Peel thing, he just happened to be on the radio. I discovered him again. It was a punk-related thing. When punk started, you couldn't hear it on the radio in the UK. It was like, people said, "Oh, it's not real music, we're not going to play that rubbish." And I thought, God, this rubbish sounds really interesting. So I was, on an old radio when you just twiddle the dial, and eventually I had something that sounded a bit different, and it was John Peel's show, and he was at that time the only outlet for alternative music in the UK. So that was incalculable, really. I'd been brought up on pop radio, but now there were all these other types of music, not just punk, but like reggae, and sometimes like, kind of experimental jazz or whatever, stuff that you couldn't really categorize it. I just kind of, it was like a whole new continent of music kind of opened up for me. So it's hard to define how important that was.
Well, the next slide is also another beginning for you, and it's a ring pull from a can. I love that. What's the significance of this?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't got that with me. Ring pulls have changed over the years.
I bet no one thought we'd be having this conversation. Ring with Jarvis Cocker. Ring pulls have changed over the years. I love it.
No, it's true, because now they don't. This is from the time when you pulled a ring pull, then it came off in your hand like that, and then you had to think, what am I going to do with this? Well, at our school, what we used to do is you could snap the tongue bit off, and then I don't know if you've still got the slide up there. That there are two kind of little slits next to there. If you fit the tongue in there and then go like that, you can flick the round bit at someone. Not that much force, but it's kind of fun to do. It's like a little tiny metal frisbee. When I found that ring pull unflicked, I thought this is rare. This is rare. This should be in the British Museum. It's very very rare object. But it also took me back to, and I can't say that this is from this particular event, but it took me back to the very early pulp rehearsals, because I'd managed to kind of persuade a few other kind of people who weren't into sport or anything like that to come to. I said, look, let's be a band. So everybody was like me, into the idea of a band, but not really knowing what we were going to do. The first rehearsal we tried to have, only 3 people turned up. So I thought, how do we get everybody to turn up? And the answer was beer. So one of the band, he had a Saturday job in a supermarket, so he could access beer underage. So he bought like a pallet of very cheap lager. And we said, okay, rehearsal Friday night, my house, free beer. And that assured full attendance. So everybody turned up, and I had to kind of assume, I really wanted the band to happen, so I had to kind of assume the mantle of responsibility. So ahead of that, I'd worked out how to play the Monkees song Stepping Stone, and also I'd written a song called Shakespeare Rock. And we learned to play those 2 songs that evening, and that was the start of it, basically.
Do you have a recording of that first rehearsal, or close to?
I have. What I can show you.
No.
Is this? This isn't the first. This isn't that rehearsal. This isn't the beer rehearsal. This, as far as I know, this is the earliest pulp rehearsal I've got. I think this is the first one. This is terrible. I mean, it's a nice looking cassette. I like the typeface and all that, but this was the rehearsal before that only had 3 people. Basically, we went round to my grandparents' house. There was an electric organ in their spare room. I had the terrible acoustic guitar I told you about with the strings so far away. And then the drummer, we didn't have any drums, so he just hit the coal scuttle, the thing that you have your coal in with the little shovel so that was a horrible noise, such a kind of noise. So I think we were that naive, we just thought if we made noise and recorded it, maybe magically a song would appear on the cassette. Maybe that's how it works, So we did that, and of course, no songs did appear on the cassette, and we started playing it back, and we were excited at first, and then after a minute, it was like, oh God, this is terrible. This is just like horrible, horrible noise. All except for this one tiny moment where a shaft of sunlight had come through a crack in the curtains in my grandparents' front room, and it had blinded us all for a moment. And then and we all stopped. So there was suddenly this kind of oasis of like, oh God, there isn't a horrible noise happening. And then in that gap, I went, the sun. And it wasn't a song, but it was this thing where suddenly it gave you a clue that making music is about making things happen at the same time, coordinating your efforts, not having a competition to see who can make the most noise or who can play fastest. Try it, and so that so it kind of it gave me a clue. This is what you have to do. You have to make things happen at the same time, and occasionally sing. and so that was the first step towards making songs.
Yeah, I love how the ring pull takes us to questions of creativity, like where does creativity come from? From this part of the book, you talk about when you take classes for kids and you watch them as they be creative, and how it starts and then how it ends is a really interesting progression. And it says a lot about how we are as creative human beings, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I think, there's, my experience has been that when you give kids instruments, obviously the first impulse is going to be make as much noise as possible, because it's like amazing, like usually in class, every teacher's saying, keep quiet, listen to me, you've got to pay attention. If you suddenly give them things that can make noise and you give them permission to make noise on them, they're going to make the most noise that they can. So my strategy has been just give them the instrument and then put your fingers in your ears for a few minutes until they get tired of making this noise, or they've given themselves a headache. Then start to talk about these ideas about try and make things happen at once. I do, partly due to the fact that I can't read music, but I don't try and impose too much of a structure on it, because I think it's best to let the kids themselves do that, because then a new idea might come, if you kind of teach them to play like blues, it's boring, Why would they want to sound like some bad bar band that you could see any night of the week, Sometimes they, just because they get like an excitement from making an instrument make a noise, they'll come up with an idea that you never would have thought of. So I try to keep some of that chaos within it, because I think that's where then it's your own creativity, not something imposed from somewhere else.
Yep, fantastic. Let's move on to the next slide. This is a Gold Star shirt, and you had lots of shirts in your collection, but this one you kept. Would that be right?
Actually, I think I looked at these slides earlier. That's actually a star jumper, but I can show you what you look. Can you see that?
Oh, there.
Yeah, look
Gold
at this.
Star,
I'm sorry.
that's it.
I'm sorry that there's a bit of grime along the top of the collar there. I'm a bit embarrassed by that.
Historical grime, Jarvis.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm showing you this slightly grimy shirt is because this marked a very big stage in my life. This is the first second-hand clothing item that I ever bought. And obviously anybody who knows anything about my career will know that I'm known for, nowadays we call it vintage, I suppose, don't we, for wearing vintage clothes. But at the time it was just second-hand, or even just clothes that used to belong to dead people. And this really, it's kind of related to the picture that we looked at of the pulp wardrobe earlier. I decided that now I was in a band, I had to get the look together. I'd start, getting my own clothes, not just wearing clothes that my mum had bought for me. But there was a big stumbling block in that plan, in that I didn't have any money. So luckily, again, an accident of birth, whatever, there was a church just like 200 yards up the road, and they would often have jumble sales, and they were super cheap. It was like 5p to get in, and it would be like you would pay between 5 and 10 pence for an item. So I started going to jumble sales, buying things. My mother was appalled at the kind of tat that I was bringing home, but it was an invaluable thing for me, because I would buy things, and at first, again, it was a bit like the music thing, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I would just like think, oh, that's a nice colour, or whatever, buy it, bring it home, look at it, and they try it on. Some things would be, ooh, you made a mistake there. Other things would kind of work. And again, through a kind of process of trial and error, I guess I developed a sense of what I like to wear, a sense of fashion, a sense of style.
It was your own style, and in a way, anti-fashion to a certain degree. It was.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that, as I say, and also a bit to do with what Pulp have always been about, I guess, is taking stuff that is, I guess people think of it as like society's refuse, and kind of rummaging amongst it and finding it that it can tell a story about the society that has rejected it. Looking at stuff. I don't know why I've always thought that sometimes it's the ostensibly throwaway items that often reveal more about our society than the things that we put in frames and hang on walls.
Mm-hmm. Well, you put this one on the wall, but you found it in the loft in a garbage bag, and this was the ticket to the John Peel show, the first gig that you were invited to perform on his radio show for the BBC. How did you feel when you found this ticket? Because that's pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, this was another one that for me was like finding a piece of buried treasure, because that ticket, it's not an understatement to say that ticket changed my life, because as we, said earlier, he was a massive influence. He broadcast 4 or 5 nights a week on the radio, and every indie band's dream was to do a John Peel session. So he had these sessions where he invited people down to the Maida Vale studios in London, and they would record 4 songs, and they would be broadcast on the programme. Often this would happen before bands were signed. He'd just have heard a band somewhere and decide to give them a session. I had given him a cassette copy of our very first demo. That ticket that you showed, he came up to Sheffield. He used to do a thing called the John Peel Roadshow, which sounds like it should have like people dancing or something like that, but it was really just him playing some records. I kind of, I went down on my own. I kind of was really nervous about when I should give him the cassette. I didn't want to get on his nerves, and therefore he chuck it in the bin. Eventually gave it to him as he was leaving. He said he'd listen to it on the drive back home. And he must have been true to his word, because about a week later, we got an invitation to go down to London to record a John Peel session. And at that point, I was just coming up to my 18th birthday. So I thought, this is it. As soon as I leave school, straight into, pop stardom. We're there. So that ticket, really gave me the confidence. Like, for instance, when I got to the end of school, I said to my mum, look, I'm not going to college. I'm not going to university. I'm going to do the band. This is what I want to do. And it gave me the kind of confidence to do that. It was a bit of a shame. The other members of the band, their parents were much more strict, and they said, oh, stop this bloody pipe dream, go to university. So they were kind of forced to do that. But so that ticket was really my entry to my what has ended up being my life. That it said, okay, maybe this isn't such a kind of silly dream after all. Do it, and so that's what I decided to do. Sometimes along that journey, I sometimes questioned that decision, because although I thought I was heading straight for stardom, immediately after leaving school, it took from that point, 1981 to 1995, for Pulp to actually have a hit record. So 14 years. Sometimes during those 14 years, I thought, was that the right decision?
Well, Jarvis, that leads us to our next slide, which is a turtle. Perfectly timed, I think, after what you've just said. What is this? And the turtle's been a recurring motif through your life. Do you want to talk about what the turtle represents for your own creativity?
I think it's time that I revealed the significance of the turtle. Yeah. Well, actually, I interpreted it more as a tortoise. Well, the thing that gets me thinking about it, so first I should tell you what you're looking at there is not just a plastic turtle come tortoise. It's a radio. And when you tune that radio in, its light, its eyes flash in time with the music. Fantastic object. But the thing that got me thinking about that was, I'll show you this picture here. This is a photograph that was taken by the local newspaper. When the news came that a group of school kids had secured a John Peel session, it was news in Sheffield. So they sent a photographer round to my mum's house to take a photograph of us. So there we are in my mum's front room, which is where we used to rehearse every Friday night. And I'd seen this picture because it had been published in the newspaper, but I'd never seen a print of it. And when I saw a print of it, I kind of looked more closely. I thought, what is happening here? So let's look closer. And hopefully you can see. Can you see? I'm holding a tortoise.
That very one, the AM FM radio.
Yeah. And when I saw that, that kind of blew my mind in a way, because I thought, how could I have known at that very moment that I was destined for life in the slow lane? It's somewhere within that mind, covered by that fuzzy hair, maybe there was some kind of premonition that it wasn't going to be straight from school to Stardom. It was going to be this long, tortuous trek, very, very slow. But, you know, if we remember the story of the tortoise and the hare, eventually the tortoise wins the race, doesn't it?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, so that's why I think it was telling me to embrace my inner tortoise.
I absolutely agree with that statement. Because we have to accept ourselves, don't we, and how we work creatively.
I think you do, yeah. I mean, I say in the book, I wish that I'd made more records. I wish it hadn't taken me maybe to this stage in my life to actually write a book, you know. But yeah, you've got your nature, and for some reason it seems to take me ages to do anything.
Jarvis, we're actually going to run out of time, and I've still got loads more slides. So which of the three would you like to finish up with before I get to a few more general questions? You've got a choice between the Carrier Bags, Barry White's Greatest Hits tape, or the Tattoos book.
Oh yeah, can I show you because I've got the tattoo book with me.
Oh yes, let's go with that.
Okay, so, well, this is kind of fitting because this comes towards the end of the book. Let me show you that. So
it's tiny.
You see that? So this is a book of tattoos, and the reason I'm showing you that is this. I guess it must be probably the same thing in Australia. You know, when you've got one of those gumball machines,
Yep.
all the gumballs are inside there, and then what they used to do, I don't know if they still do it, is put these little tattoo books amongst the gumballs. And so, as a kid, you know, the lure of the gumball machine wasn't really the gumballs at all, because when you get one of those, generally speaking, as soon as you bite it, it just goes to powder. Because like those gumballs have probably been in there for like 4 years or something. So the thing that I was really wanting was to get one of these little books because they look very interesting. So I think they're a very pop item in a way. I think that's the way pop works, you know, this lure of excitement of this thing that you might be able to get. So every time there was a gumball machine on the way to school. Whenever I had some loose change in my pocket, I would put it in there and try and get one.
Love it.
This went on for years, lifting the little hatch, looking, just a gumball. One fateful day, rotated the thing, opened the hatch, and this book was there. So what did I do with it? Well, as you can see, I certainly didn't use it. I just, because it had taken so much time to get it, I just couldn't bring myself to use it. So, but I am going to show you inside. Would you like to look?
Yes, please.
This is going to be difficult because, as you can see, it is quite small. Let's see what we get. So there we are. Look.
Oh.
The serpent, you know, like back in the Garden of Eden, the serpent showing us about forbidden knowledge. What else have we got? Oh, an American flag. We'll pass over that. The sun. So, yeah, I guess what I ended up doing with this was I had like a kind of plastic apple thing that I stored little bits, trinkets in, and I put it in there, and that was there for years. And I kind of, as I characterize it in the book, I kind of thought of this as almost like a little book of magic spells. It was like to show you that the pop dream can come true. You know, every day I'd pass that machine to no avail, and then eventually it happened. So this proves that if you kind of do keep on your path, even if you are moving like a tortoise, inch by inch by inch, eventually the dream can come true. And so this is it. That's why this book is important. It's the dream come true.
It sure is. It's beautiful. Well, Jarvis, through the book too, speaking of pop sensibility, which is something you very much embraced because of your upbringing, and it had a huge influence on the way you created and what you made. You talk about Andy Warhol as well, and I love the line that pop had people reappraising the contents of their rubbish bins, because we think about Andy Warhol and the Campbell's soup can and all of those sorts of things. But you also suggest that pop and the pop sensibility democratised creativity and art. How?
Yeah, just, I mean, partly through that, you know, making people appraise. It was saying the things that you're surrounded by on a daily basis are valid, you know. So taking a Campbell's soup can, as you say, and then putting it on a wall was saying, like, these things aren't just throwaway. They're because you have them in your life, they're significant. And I think it's hard, probably very hard for us now to imagine what impact that had at the time, you know, because now you see an Andy Warhol painting and really what you see is like a load of money nailed to the wall. You know, oh God, that picture is worth 40 million. So you may as well just be looking at loads of dollars nailed to a wall. It's become, but I guess when he first showed stuff, people just thought this isn't art. You know, that often is the way with something that's important. At first, people just reject it because they just don't. It's too much of a break from what they've been taught. You know, the idea that art is some rarefied thing that comes from a high place. And he would say, no, it can come from a low place, the stuff that you might deem throwaway. So I think that had a massive effect. And it also meant that the general population could relate to it. And then the other pop movement that I talk about, I guess, is like, say, the thing of paperback books, you know, that now books and literature were available to people because you could buy a book that was like, I don't know, 50 pence or something like that. And so it democratized it, meant more people had access to it. So I think that's, for me, that's the idea of good pop, is stuff that it lets everybody participate. And I always think it's the more people can participate in things, the more interesting it is. When it's just a certain sector of society that have access to things, it becomes very boring. You know, you need lots of voices there to make things interesting.
I've got a couple of questions before we wind up. This from Ariella in the audience, who said, is that an Oxfam blazer you're wearing?
No, actually, well, this is a nice velvet pinstripe jacket. It is second-hand. Look, it was made by a company called Roulette. But there's a guy in Camden Market who I buy a lot of clothes off, and occasionally I'll go around and see what he's got in. Usually the things are slightly damp, but I've had this thing, I don't really go to charity shops anymore, because I don't know if it's the same thing in Australia. They kind of sift through the stuff too much now. You go into an Oxfam shop and it's all colour coded. There's like a rail of red clothes, a rail of green clothes, a rail of blue clothes. Maybe some people make their fashion decisions based on everything being the same colour, but I don't.
I think this question is a great one to end on, Jarvis. It's from Vanessa, who's here tonight. Has writing this book changed your relationship to objects and collecting? Do you still collect things, or are you cured of the compulsion?
Well, I think we've established that I'm not cured of it, and I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story that really illustrates that. So we looked at this earlier. Now, when I started the publicity trail for this book back in February, my first interview was with a guy called Adam Buxton. And I thought, well, you know, if we're going to be talking about the book, I'll take some of the objects with me. And this was one of them. And then when the book actually came out, we had like a small exhibition in London to celebrate it. So obviously, then I went looking for this again for it to be in the exhibition. Could not find it. Panicked, you know. Panicked to a degree that really appalled me. You know, I thought
we've all been there. It's okay.
No, but it's like I was thinking, surely now I can let all this junk go because I've used it to make a book. So that's it. Great, job done. But couldn't find it. So I kept going back. You know, like you do that thing when you've lost something, you keep going back to the place where you thought you put it, even though you've looked there like 20 times. You still think, oh, maybe it's going to magically appear this time. Didn't do that. So sadly, I went to the extent of going on eBay and finding people who were selling old.
Oh, Jarvis, no.
Yeah, there is. Well, believe it or not, there's a surprising number of people who deal in dead stock soap. And bought a bar and thought, if I can't find it, what I'm going to have to do is wash my hands constantly for about 3 days and wear it down and then just pass it off as the one. To cut a long story short, I eventually went back to the place I'd looked 20 times and found the bag that I'd been looking in, and then suddenly realized that it was one of those tote bags that have a little sewn in pocket for you to put your wallet in. And this was in there. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, the real, genuine article.
Jarvis Cocker, you've been an absolute delight to talk to tonight. The book is beautifully put together, not just in terms of the words and the memories and the stories, but visually it's an absolute treat as well. And I've just really loved being able to talk to you about all of this stuff. And I love the idea that creativity can come from anywhere, and we don't necessarily have to have the great stuff around us all the time. It can sometimes come from something that you thought wasn't as meaningful as perhaps it is. And I love that you've shone a light on that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been lovely to speak to you as well. And yeah, I should give a shout out. The book was designed by a guy called Julian House, and he really took it to another level. So I want to make sure he gets credit for that. Yeah.
Excellent, Jarvis. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think the crowd are very appreciative too. Big thanks to Jarvis Cocker.
Thank you.
Thank you.